bucka. Haha. You know the deal.
Today we're going to do an introduction to measurement. And as an introduction to measurement, the first question we're going to ask ourselves is, what is measurement? Well, there are a few different types of things that we can measure. We can measure the temperature outside. We can measure the angle between two lines. We can measure how much money we have in the bank. But for our purposes today, when we're talking about measurement, we're going to be talking about describing the size of a shape. And so if we're going to be talking about describing the size of a shape, the next question we have to ask ourselves is, what types of shapes do we measure? What I'm going to ask you to do next is to create a chart in your notes with the following headings: type, examples, name, and units. And you're going to be adding some information to this chart after our lesson today. So leave some space underneath what we put in the chart today. The first type of shape that we're going to be talking about describing the size of or measuring is what's called a one-dimensional shape. And in general, when we're talking about a one-dimensional shape, we're talking about a line segment. Now, a line segment can take various forms. Here, I've drawn a line segment that's just simply a straight line. But we could also measure the size of a line segment that's curved, part of a circle, and this would be called an arc. Now, for name, when we're talking about name, we're talking about what the name of the measurement is. When we're describing the size of a one-dimensional shape, or a line segment, we usually call that length or distance. So when we're measuring a one-dimensional shape, we're asking how long is this line, or how long is this arc? In order to do that, we have to describe how long those are using units. In Canada, as in most of the world, we use the metric system. And a few examples of units that we would use in the metric system are millimeters, centimeters, meters, and kilometers. There are other examples of units we use for linear measurements in the metric system, but those are the most commonly used ones. And the one that we're going to be talking about today is centimeters. So since we're going to be referring back to this chart and adding some notes to it in further lessons, I'd ask you to create the rest of your notes on a separate piece of paper, or at the very least leave some room underneath to add some information to this chart. The next question we're going to ask ourselves is, if we're going to be talking about centimeters, well, what is a centimeter? And when you're asking yourself, what is a centimeter, the first thing you're going to want to ask yourself is, well, what shape is a centimeter? And a centimeter is actually a line segment, and it's a line segment that is 1 centimeter long. So here I've drawn a line segment, and this line segment is 1 centimeter long. That is a centimeter. That is what a centimeter looks like. So if we're asking ourselves, well, what about this line here? How long is this line? Or how many centimeters is this line? What we're asking ourselves really is, how many of these fit on to this line? And here you can see I've pasted a few of these. Each one of these pieces is 1 centimeter long. So if we count how many there are here, there are 6 of those pieces there. So this line segment that I've drawn here is, in fact, 6 centimeters long. And the reason it's 6 centimeters long is because 6 of those 1 centimeter pieces fit onto that line. If we were going to go back to our chart here and measure the size of that arc, well, again, we would be asking ourselves, how many of these 1 centimeter pieces fit onto this arc? It's a little bit more difficult to fit lines onto an arc, but if I measure how long that arc is, it's 10 centimeters long, which means 10 of these 1 centimeter line segments will fit on to this arc. So that's a general introduction to measuring the size of one-dimensional shapes using centimeters. In future lessons, we'll talk about the relationship between these units between millimeters, centimeters, meters, and kilometers. The last thing that I'm going to ask you to do to complete the lesson today is to find 5 items in your house to measure the length of in centimeters. If you have a ruler that you can use, that would be great. If you don't have a ruler, you can estimate how long they are. Please include these 5 items, the names of the items, in your notes, as well as how long each one of them was in centimeters.